unidentified flying object.
I'm Jack Oswald, and you're listening.
This is Hudson Hammond, and you're listening to...
I'm Richard C. Hoagland, and you're listening to...
I'm Art Bell, and you're listening to Dr. J Radio Live.
We have an unidentified flying object.
Welcome back to another great episode of Dr. J Radio Live. I'm your host, Dr. J, broadcasting from the City of Angels via Late Night in the Midlands and the terrestrial stations associated with, in association with one of our affiliates in the United Kingdom, Deprogram Radio Network, along with their affiliate stations. And also, real quick, folks, let me remind you about this weekend's Spookathon, which means tomorrow, Friday, my normal show at this time will not happen because Late Night in the Midlands is having literally a 70-hour run from tomorrow morning, Friday morning, literally till Monday morning. So if you guys, I'm going to be part of it. If you guys and gals out there are interested in hearing when I'm going to be on, it's going to be 2 a.m. Monday morning, 11 p.m. Pacific time on Sunday evening. And we will be talking about some amazing stuff back with Keith Linder. Now, this is the third day in a row that we've had two guests per show. We started on Tuesday with, of course, I do know Michael Dukakis was the second guest, and for some name, the problem, the first one is eluding me at the moment. But yesterday, if you all recall, the InfoWars World Affairs expert, Joel Skousen, was the second hour guest, but the first one was H.H. Holmes' great-grandson, also known as Jack the Ripper. At least that's what the evidence is pointing to. And today, the second hour guest is Michelle Bellinger. She is a psychic vampire as well as a demonologist and many other things. But the first guest, we're going to have a lot of fun right now. It's Clarissa Vazquez. And of course, for all you Late Night the Midlands listeners, you know exactly who I'm talking about. She hosts two shows on this network, Hidden World and Periscope Uncensored. Ms. Vazquez, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
It's always a pleasure to speak to you. And when I just asked what you did on your last show, you mentioned Church of Satan, which actually ties in for a few reasons. First of all, before Aquino ended up becoming Michael Aquino, for those of you who don't know who that is, you would have to be sort of living under a rock. But he's now terminally ill, poor guy, and he does not do any other interviews. In his place, Monday, Lon Milo Duquette of the OTO and Blanche Barton will be back on she's one of the high priests from the Church of Satan. Not the highest, I believe that is Peter Gilmore. So let me ask you, Clarissa, during your show on the Church of Satan, I'm assuming you've done this topic before, right?
Yeah, our guest was Corvus Nocturnum, and he's the publicity spokesperson for the church itself. And I've interviewed him on past shows a couple of times. Great guy, very talented writer, brilliant artist. And we had a lot of fun with him. He was on Hidden World last Monday. Yeah,
and you know what? I would love to actually talk to someone else within the Church of Satan, because Blanche Barton, although her being one of the high priests, she has more to say because she has the only official biography, not autobiography, that's, Anton LaVey, since he never really wrote one, but she did. The closest official biography is hers. So usually the conversations tend to talk about that. Now, since you've been discussing this topic for however long you first started having any guests associated with, whether it be the Church of Satan or anything in the left-hand path, for all those out there, since I know the answer, but I know you could probably give a more eloquent answer, considering you've recently talked about this. Can you describe for everybody the difference between the left-hand path and the right-hand path?
Well, it's always a hot button topic whenever you mention the S word, being Satan, or satanic, or anything having to do with something that could be affiliated with Satan, Lucifer, Beelzebub, what have you. And the one thing that I was very shocked to learn is that the official Church of Satan is not necessarily what mainstream belief would consider satanic. It's more along the lines of being your best self. And our guest, Corvus Nocturnum, really said it best when he gave the analogy of, when you're flying on an airplane and the flight attendant tells you to put on your own oxygen mask before you put on the mask of your child because you're no use to them dead. And so that's really what the Church of Satan is all about, and I'm not a practitioner of the Church of Satan. I'm actually a practicing Wiccan, but you cannot be of service to others or to society if you're not being the best version of yourself. And that was really what struck home for me in interviewing Corvus last Wednesday was, you've got to work on yourself before you can help others and help the world and help society.
Yeah, exactly. And I agree with that. This is why within the left-hand path, I got to tell you, I was scared. I can give you a little quick history of how I was first getting involved. It had to do with a combination that my brother was really into religion. And so he always had all the texts from everything. So as I was perusing through his library, I saw the Satanic Bible. And of course, since really being a little, I guess what society has sort of tagged them with being, of course I was like, oh no, is this going to jinx me? Is this going to be a problem that it's near me? And so I kind of knew in the back of my head that he had it, and he was like, it's not what you think, it's a circus act. Then I was somehow starting to find out about Aleister Crowley. And so despite what people were warning me, oh no, it's an evil person and evil writings, I found myself buying the Book of the Law. And it wasn't until I came across another book, which was written by with Michael Aquino, along with another person who was the only person to reach the level 6, the highest level in Temple of Set, which really took the Book of Law and then flipped it in a sense to make it so you could understand it today. That was really my first thing with it. So when I finally booked Michael Aquino, I asked him before we got on the show, because we were going to talk about his book, Mind War. I said, tell me, how are you involved in black magic? Aren't you scared at all? And he said, well, if you're going to mess around with magic, magic is magic. It doesn't matter if you want to call it black or white. It's what your intentions are. What do you think about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And being a practicing Wiccan, I was a guest on, I forget the name of the show. I was on Chip's show the other night, and we had a discussion about intent. Yes. And it's all about your intent. And, everything in the universe, regardless of your faith base, everything in the universe, there's a balance. There's male and female, there's darkness and light, there's positive and negative. And so, for those that only practice the quote unquote white magic, that's all well and good, but you still need to know about the dark side, if you will, because you have to have at least a knowledge base of that balance and know where the line sits, and there is a gray area. And so you need to be knowledgeable in both sides, and really knowledge is power. And so if you know about the dark, then there should be no fear, no anxiety in practicing magic at all, because you have that knowledge.
Agreed. And that gray area is really pretty much everything, because that gray area is what a lot of people that have bad experiences end up abusing, because they end up with the evil intent or service to others. And I've seen plenty, I guess, going to Conscious Life Expo, even though they're pariahs and things like that, but there a lot of them, I haven't met any super evil people in that, at least from the people I met. But a lot of the people that I did meet, most of them, of course, there are a few bad apples everywhere, were really nice people. And one of the things they were telling me was that not to impose beliefs on others. So if I asked about what they have about Church of Satan, they'll tell me. But it's one of their things they said is, if we wouldn't even push this on you the way we don't want to be pushed on from other religions. So I actually got to say, it kind of felt softer. It really did. I get this idea that these people are creating rituals and voodoo dolls behind my back or hexing me just to rob me, sort of thing. And so I'm starting to get the idea that everything that society has labeled, because like you said, the S word or the L word or, things like that, that it's not as bad as people say. And the only thing Aquino did tell me is that the closest religion, and correct me if I'm wrong, that people adopt after leaving one of these left-hand paths is actually Buddhism. Have you heard that?
I had not heard that, but I do agree with you, that is one of the major difference between the left and the right when it comes to quote unquote big religion, is that the left side religions or faith bases, if you will, tend to be less invasive. They're more of a live and let live, whether it's Buddhism, Wicca, Satanism, Taoism. They don't try to push their influence on other people. It's more of a live and let live kind of society. You're free to believe how you want. Just leave me to believe how I want. And, whereas the right is, you have to do it my way or, you're going to be damned for all eternity. And so it's less invasive and it's more peaceful. There's more love. Agreed.
And so now let me ask you, when you started practicing Wicca, do you mind going into detail about that?
I don't mind.
Okay. How many years ago did you start really becoming a Wiccan practicer, a witch?
I was first exposed to it at a really young age. I want to say I was 7 or 8, and some girls at school were practicing, and I didn't, fully understand it. I just thought, it was kind of cool, something that we played at a little bit. And then growing up, I explored different areas of faith. I was raised in a very agnostic household, and my brother and I went on 2 completely different paths. He is now a very devoted and practitioner of the LDS faith, and whereas I am obviously a very, very devoted pagan, and that causes some interesting events at the holiday dinner table, let me tell you. But my poor mother. And I explored many, many different avenues. When I was a teenager, I was baptized in the Southern Baptist Church, and I even explored Judaism for a while, but I kept coming back to Wicca. It seemed to be the best fit for me, and I'm of the firm belief that different people were designed to follow different paths in their life. Some people were designed to be doctors, some people were designed to be writers, and some people were designed to follow different faith paths depending on what they needed to learn and explore during this lifetime. I'm a big believer in reincarnation, and that we all have things that we need to learn during each lifetime. And I kept coming back to Wicca, and it seemed to be the best fit for me. And so whatever it is that I am meant to learn and explore during this lifetime, it's I was meant to do it on this Wiccan path.
And you know what, you're actually right about life drawing you in that way, as we were meant to be. When I first started paying attention after I went through talking to Aquino, reading my brother's Satanic Bible, and a few books from Crowley, including the one that really talked about the Book of the Law. So I would constantly go back to Psychic Eye, because they have a great library of books, and they're whether it's Wicca, whether it's, left hand path, whether it's actually, Church of Satan, because they'll break it, little areas within the left hand path.
Right.
And so I was constantly going to that area. It wasn't always in the satanic area, but it was the left-hand path area to grab a book from Crowley, or, of course, I wanted my little leather book with parchment paper for my own little diary. I had to buy a dragon blood ink pen and also a dove blood ink pen just because they look pretty cool, and a really cool dipping pen. And I asked them, I said, should I be concerned? They said, absolutely not. If that's what's drawing you, well, then go with it. Mm-hmm. And again, they reassured it's about intent. And I know, because I believe, just like you said, in reincarnation. I believe in, obviously, we will always have other lives in different forms, if not the same form. But even after I had done this, I had gone through all that and really started to look into it. And, even to this day, it still intrigues me why I love talking to people about it. Well, when I had an NDE, after a coma went wrong, and it was a very positive one. There was a lot of great light. I was speaking to a family friend who had passed away, and it was very vivid. So if looking into the left-hand path and buying books on it, of course, I've never gotten as far as rituals or joining somebody. Well, then it definitely didn't affect where I was going to end up on the other side. And that actually helped a lot. Now, let's talk about some, and of course, we'll talk about other topics as we go through other things that you did in the show recently. So because you've been practicing Wicca, obviously there are rituals involved. Do you get, because I know one thing I learned when it comes to rituals, it could be in as much as you want to put in it. If they're, what you're wearing, the more statues and candles is really your own for you, as what I was told. It's not something that's necessary for each person to have the intended result.
Right.
So so I'm glad I'm asking you this, because I wanted to ask you about specific rituals you've had success with, and how far did you go with the rituals as far as extravagance with the things that what I was sort of alluding to of what you can have, because there's so many things we can have, of like I was just mentioning, writing on parchment paper, sigil magic, different things like that. So if you could talk about some specific rituals and what the intended results were and if they worked for you, I'd love to hear that.
Sure. It's kind of funny with me. I have found that I have my best results when I perform ritual or cast for other people. I've got a couple of friends who have been trying for 15 years now to have a baby, and they are LDS of all things. And I kept asking them, do you want my assistance? No. And finally, one of them said, yeah, go ahead. And they are finally having some success with IVF, finally. And it wasn't until I got involved, that they started having some success. But when I try to cast for myself, it backfires.
Oh.
It backfires big time. I've tried off and on over the years, to cast love spells, for myself, bring that one, special person into my life, and, so that I don't have to, walk this path alone. And and I'll cast a spell, and within hours I'll have, like 3 random, phone calls or text messages or whatever from guys wanting to just hook up. And,
yeah, but not love.
Yeah, no. And, so it backfires. So I've learned over the years to stop casting for myself and just cast for others. And the majority of Wiccans believe in the law of 3, that whatever you send out comes back to you times 3. And so that is something that I practice and that I follow very wholeheartedly. And I, by casting for others, with the intention of love or peace or or balance, I find that comes back to me. Ultimately, it's not instant gratification, which in this day and age, with technology being what it is, we've kind of grown accustomed to instant gratification, having the world at our fingertips.
Yeah.
And so, with this, it's not instant gratification. I don't send something out into the universe for someone else and then it immediately comes back to me. No, it takes a while. But that's okay. I am meant to receive what I am meant to receive when I am meant to receive it. And I'm okay with that.
Yeah, and one thing I wanted to say is I'm sure you've heard of the Maharishi effect, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so when you are doing rituals and you said casting a love spell hasn't been successful for you except for those random hookups, but what if you had the others, your friends of yours, all cast a spell for you? Do you think that, because how many would there be? Because obviously the exponential rise of what you're sending out to the universe via the magic, it will come back, based on how many people. And that I love when the Maharishi effect, we're paying attention to it, because I've seen how it's really changed things. For me, it was the Washington, D.C. experiment. So I'm curious if you've ever asked them to cast it for you and how many people were involved.
I have not asked others to cast for me, just because in my mind that seems a little selfish. There are so many others in this world and in this universe that are in need, and in my opinion, their needs far outweigh, my desire to love and be loved in return.
Yes.
So
Yes.
I have not asked others to cast for me, but if I were, the greater the energy going out,
Yes.
is the energy return is going to be equal, if not greater. And so it would definitely have an impact. But again, like I said, I won't ask others to cast for me. It seems selfish in my opinion.
And I'm glad you mentioned that, because this goes back to service to self or service to others.
Right.
And I'm a big believer in service to others, in any way. If I'm driving and I see someone, their car broke down and they need to push it, I mean, I don't feel right just driving by and not offering assistance. I think that is one of the basic things of being human. If we stop helping each other, then we're going to lose the part of the humanity that makes us the best, and which is love.
Yeah, absolutely. And it all boils down to love. And I think humanity has lost a lot of that over the last couple of centuries. It has become, the golden rule, if you will, has gone by the wayside. It has become all too appropriate to tell someone to F off, or to, give them the middle finger in society. We as a species have forgotten how to love.
Agreed. And that is a huge problem. Do you ever talk to or have heard of Father Jack Ashcraft, the exorcist?
I've heard of it.
When he was on, he talked about the fact that there is a rise in the church. He left the Catholic Church, by the way, not affiliated with them anymore, because he's anti-Vatican, anti-globalism. So he's a trained priest in Orthodox religions or any religion for someone to involve as exorcists. And he said that the training in all religions that there's Jewish exorcists, almost all
Right.
faiths have it. He said that is gone up exponentially in the last 25 years, simply because we as a society have moved further away from the part that makes us human, the love, the service to others, and more towards the service to self. And we could see the crimes and things happening on a daily basis, which I think are far worse than what has been happening just in America and even in the UK in the last 25 years. And if you factor all the wars we've been in, the rise of ISIS and different things like that, we have been living in very turbulent times where I think the ugliest out of man is coming out. And I don't think man has been this ugly since World War II. And the reason I say World War II and not Vietnam is for the sheer number of areas and years we've been involved in some of these wars, like, Afghanistan. It's a very scary thing, Clarissa. Now, you're going to be in the Spookathon, too. You heard me say that in the beginning, obviously, right?
Yes.
What day are you doing your show?
Chris and Jax and I will be on Saturday the 27th from 4 a.m. to 7 a.m.
Nice. Okay. And I'm going to be on, I don't want to say 24 hours. It's 22 hours later. So by all means, I hope we are able to chat, because one great thing that Katie was telling me about it is, instead of just expecting for listeners to be around, for hosts. And so I booked someone amazing. It was Keith Linder, which he's been on the network before. I believe he's actually on Heather Wade's show tonight. He was my guest this past Monday, but I couldn't have thought someone better for the Spookathon than somebody who had the worst poltergeist case in history. It's actually so scary. If you're interested, what I'll do, if you want to see anything of it, I will actually drop for you right now in the Skype the official report, assuming I could pull it properly. It's called the Bothell Hell House, but we'll come back to that. You know it then.
Yeah, I've been a paranormal investigator for over 20 years, and so I'm very familiar with the case.
Okay. Then I definitely want to give you that report, just because he gave it to me after the interview. Not like right that same day. I think he just finally got the official 60-some page report, and it's very much in detailed. And, to me, after watching his YouTube channel, I was more scared than ever. Let me ask you this, because this was really shocking to me. Grant Wilson, do you know who that is, right?
Yes. I've met Grant on many occasions, and I've worked with him twice.
He told me that he asked ghosts multiple times what we look like to them. He said shadows. And that to me was mind-blowing, because I never thought of that, because we could not see them. We could sort of, hear noises, or we could see them throwing something across the room, like poor Keith happened, at the Bothell Hell House, or things like that. But now it sort of makes sense, because a lot of times we see them as shadows, not just apparitions, whether they be see-through or anything like that. Have you heard that before?
No, I hadn't, but it doesn't surprise me, considering some of the theories that are bouncing around right now.
Yes. And I would have loved, I guess it would have to be, it would be pretty crappy to be in that position where you have to die and be stuck in the middle of, from not here and not there, but in that plane, the place between the places, I guess. So we could see that and verify it, but I think that is really not a very good plan. You know what I mean? If you end up dying, you want to move to the next stage, which would be incarnation. You don't want to be that person stuck. There was one thing he told me, and I'm sure as an investigator, you've probably come up with more, but this was the first time I've actually heard a case with this sort of conclusion, but I know it's not the only one. He said that there was a case where he was talking to a ghost of that was near some elderly woman, and he got the name Beatrice from the ghost. Ultimately, they led him to a book, basically a diary from an old mobster, and the mobster was basically writing in the diary so he could talk about the things he had done as sort of a way to lift the burdens on himself. So what he said was that in reading this, he found the name Beatrice. She ended up being a mistress who got pregnant. He was afraid she would squeal, and if it wasn't for the ghost interacting with him, he said then they would have never solved a 60-year person missing persons case. Have you heard of any other people or anybody who's involved in paranormal actually having a ghost help them solve a crime?
I've heard about it. I haven't experienced anything like that personally. We did have a case not too long ago where we were working very closely with a family, and come to find out, the spirit that we were working with was the spirit of a child who had been murdered. And through our research of the property, because we were the EVPs we were getting and things like that were just a little bizarre. And with every case that we work, we do a thorough research into the property and the general area. And there had been a child murdered 2 houses down from where we were investigating, and the activity, the onset of the activity was during the final trimester of the pregnancy of this family with their first child. And so for whatever reason, I don't know if the child, went, oh, there's loving parents here. I'm going to try to interact with them or what have you. But, we were able to determine that it was, in fact, just based on the EVPs that we were getting and stuff like that, that it was the spirit of this child that had been murdered 2 houses down, that was causing all of the problems for this family. And working closely with the family, we were able to, kind of get the kid to back off a little bit, and because they were actually frightening the family, and, they were frightened for their new child and for themselves because they didn't understand what was going on.
So this EVP that you got was actually the child, right? It wasn't another sort of...
It was the child. And, based on what they were saying. And, we captured an EVP of this child saying, "Mommy, I don't want to die." And we were actually able to go back through court testimony. And one of the things that was said in court by one of the witnesses there was that the child was saying over and over again, "Mommy, I don't want to die."
Oh, that's very telling right there. Very telling, because that sounds like the final words that were probably going through her head and vocalizing as it was happened.
Right.
The sad thing I fear is anybody who was taken so suddenly, especially a child, probably didn't even know she was dead. Did you get that impression?
We got the impression that she was pretty well aware that she had died, but she was more than likely very lost.
Yeah, because she never made it through to the other side. She was in the place between, I guess, the place within the place, whatever you want to call it. Yeah.
Right.
Now, a lot of people talk about using, or if you're involved in the occult in any way, then you're opening the door to demonic influence, from obsession to, what was the other one he said? There's 2 of them with obsession,
obsession, and then possession.
Yes. Now, I've had a Ouija board for years, and I've used it. It sort of got put away for a while, but recently I've been really trying to find people to use it, and everybody's so scared. People are scared even of a pendulum, and like, that's just your subconscious telling you what it's thinking, as opposed to your conscious. That's a direct link to your higher self. Mm-hmm. I look at these tools as, divination tools or anything like that, tarot, as not really being into the occult to the extreme that people would think that, oh, geez, you're going to invite demonic influence. That's my take, but more and more people are starting to scare me. As a practicing Wiccan, what do you use these tools? I would think so, right?
I do use them, but I don't use them on investigations. When I investigate, I take a very analytical approach and try to utilize the scientific method whenever possible. And so I follow the premise that you cannot prove the paranormal with the paranormal.
Yes, very good answer.
And so, I have pendulums. I read oracle cards. I've got 2, 4, 6, 7 oracle decks sitting on my shelf right now. and and I've used Ouija boards, and people will come to me and go, you never know what you're inviting in. You never know who you're talking to or if they're telling the truth. You're just opening yourself up for evil. And my rebuttal response is always, how is that any different than conducting an EVP session?
Let me ask you a question. For EVPs, what do you use to record them?
We've got several different devices. I personally use a Zoom H4n stereo recorder. It's, one of the top of the line devices. But, I also have a couple of, analog microcassette recorders. It's like fishing. Sometimes you got to change your bait or your tackle and, in order to catch what you're looking for. And it's the same thing with investigating. Sometimes you have to change up your tactics or change up your equipment in order to, catch what you're looking for. But for the most part, I use my digital recorder and to capture EVP. But again, you never know unequivocally who you're speaking to or if they're telling you the truth.
Agreed. And that's something major that a lot of people, including myself, have always told others when it comes to Ouija board, because I've actually sort of experienced it. You think you're talking to one person, and then all of a sudden the demands being made by that ghost or spirit, and then when you start really becoming a little more angry, and then all of a sudden that person, when I ask, so your name is this, and it just slides to no with force, and then I get some sort of freaky name. Now, let me ask this, because this really is something that I'm hoping I can come across someone other than what Father Ashcraft told me. He said some of the craziest exorcisms, and this applies when I'm asking you to not just exorcisms, but EVPs, and probably EVP specifically. Have you ever recorded a forgotten or dead language?
No, I have not. But being a seminary educated minister, I am actually seminary educated and ordained as a minister. I actually went to school and, learned about the Bible and the Torah and the Quran and all of that. I have assisted in exorcisms, and we have had a couple of cases, where I've assisted, where the person being exorcised was speaking in a language that they presumably had no knowledge of, and one of those was perceived to be Aramaic. Now, I don't speak Aramaic. I know little to nothing about Aramaic, other than it is, a very, very ancient and presumably dead language. But one of the other exorcists involved was saying, he's speaking Aramaic. I'm like, great. What's he saying? I don't know. I can't translate it. And, well, how do you know? How do you know he's speaking Aramaic and not some, ancient form of German or something to that effect? And so, there were a lot of unanswered questions with that one. But ultimately the exorcism was successful, and the person in question stopped speaking that other language by the time we had finished 3 weeks later.
And exactly that, to me, right there would be the given that you were able to heal that person or remove that demon or the influence, because if they're speaking something so old, Aramaic, that's not like you could just hop in a plane and go and expect people to sort of be, conversing at some little local coffee shop in whatever country.
Right. Right.
So
Google Translate does not have Aramaic.
you know what, I'll tell you what, I'm actually not shocked, because they do not have ancient Greek either. I'm curious. I'm sure through all these cases somebody probably recorded something in ancient Aramaic. Now, what about just gibberish, tongues?
Yeah, well, heck, you can go to any mainstream Christianity compound or church, and find people speaking in tongues, and and you kind of take that with a grain of salt. It is what it is, and people believe that they're speaking to, or God is speaking through them. Um, but is it an actual language, or is it just gibberish? I don't know.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And that's the key thing. But the fact that you didn't recognize it would be one that I would definitely mark, and just try to get as many ears on it and be like, do you know what the heck this is being said? Or is it just literally pig Latin, or just gibberish for that matter?
Right.
Let me talk, because we got about a little over 10 minutes, and of course I want to leave enough time for you to plug in everything you need to. Of course, for not just the Spookathon, which we talked about, but upcoming guests. Talk about both of your shows. So, speaking of guests, actually, let me ask, before I ask about some other investigations you have done, is what other, if in the last, say, 3 months, which 3 shows, and it doesn't have to be because of the guest, it could have just been because of the topic or way it came out, stuck out in your mind as ones that came out really excellent for you and the listeners?
Well, I've only been back in radio for a few weeks. Periscope Uncensored has been running for about 10 years, but I took a 3-year hiatus. It just stopped being fun, and L&M is the 3rd network that Periscope will have aired on. So I've only been back in radio for a few weeks, between Periscope Uncensored and Hidden World. So I really can't go back 3 months, really, but I am having a lot of fun being back on the radio. I've got 2 great co-hosts. Chris Carr is my co-host on Hidden World, and Jax is my co-host on Periscope Uncensored. And, we've got great co-hosts. We've got great guests lined up. Periscope is actually booked through the middle of February right now as far as guests. Yeah. People have found out, that we're back on the air, and they're like, please, can I be on the show? And it's like, depending on who it is, it's sure. And, there've been a couple others, and we're like, well, let's see. Because Periscope has a pretty long and prestigious reputation of being very straight-laced and down to the nuts and bolts. We're not afraid to ask the hard questions and tell it like it is. And so we've, coming up on November 5th on Periscope, we've got Rick McCallum from Hollywood Ghost Hunters.
Nice.
Is going to be our guest.
Nice.
Yeah. And this coming Monday on Hidden World, we're going to have Marla Brooks on the show. We're going to be talking witchcraft on Hidden World. So, we've got a lot of great guests coming up. I've got 2 amazing co-hosts, and I'm loving this new network. Again, this is the 3rd network I've been a part of, and I'm loving the network, loving the whole L&M family, and
Yes.
really, really enjoying being back in radio.
And I've always loved L&M ever since I came here before my 20-month hiatus. Not by choice, unfortunately. There was just some other, I guess, it's not just because of health, it's because of the moronic U.S. healthcare system, which is far from good. That kept me out. But I really got to thank Daryl and Katie for waking up that lion back in me to bring me back, because at that point I was lost if I would ever make it. So I'm glad that they're at the helm now, because it's drastically different than when it was when I first came in 2016, right after Art Bell left, and the network I was on at the time, Dark Matter, sort of got rid of every host unless it was the live show. At the time was Heather Wade, who is now in our family. Now, a couple things that I definitely think would be ideal, even though both of us, and the cool thing about your Spookathon is you're having both co-hosts.
Yeah, that saves me from having to do 2 shows on Spookathon.
Yeah, and it's going to be fun.
We're going to do 1 3-hour show.
Since I know everyone's going to be asking, I know for sure I'm going to be asking my guest and any callers, and if you join in, anybody who joins in, I want to ask them about what's the greatest Halloween story that you know, or that you were part of, or that you had heard that you could share with us. And since we're leading into the Spookathon, I was hoping to get something like that from you, Clarissa.
Oh gosh. The greatest Halloween story?
Yeah,
I don't
maybe from one of your ghost hunts, or maybe a malevolent ghost, or something that you experienced, maybe a UFO sighting, anything like that.
probably I get asked this question a lot. What is your most memorable investigation, or your scariest moment? And having been doing this for over 20 years, I'm pretty desensitized to it. It really takes a lot to unnerve me. And about 8 years ago, I guess, we were doing a residential investigation, old 3-story farmhouse. The clients could not keep it rented. People would rent it, and a few weeks later, they're like, I'm out, keep the deposit, we're out. And so they called us in, and there were 10 of us on scene because it was such a big location. And everybody was having personal experiences that seemed to be custom tailored to their comfort threshold. The people that were unnerved by seeing things were seeing things. The people that were unnerved by being touched were being touched. And of course, I'm going through this investigation going, I'm not having an experience. Everybody else is having experiences, but I'm not. Okay. And I was a little sad about that. And I was up in the attic area with 2 other investigators. Mm-hmm. And I was using a piece of equipment. I was using a night owl monocular. It allowed me to see in the dark, but it wasn't recording. And I saw what looked to me like a dead bird on the floor, like a dead blackbird on the floor.
Like a crow?
Like a small blackbird.
Gotcha.
And it turned out to be a piece of crumpled up black garbage bag. Just a small piece of black trash bag crumpled up on the floor. But, I said, ew, what is that? And then I go, is there a dead bird in here? And you can hear the other investigators go, oh no, I don't know where. And we go back and listen to the audio, and you can hear me say, ew, what is that? And then this voice comes across going, dead bird. And then you hear me say, is there a dead bird in here? And so I got my personal experience later because what I was experiencing was actually in my head. It knew what I thought I was seeing. And so I didn't get my personal experience on site. It was after we had already gone home and we're going over the sound files and everything, and I hear this going, that SOB was in my head. It's scary enough with just me in there, but knowing that something else was in my head with me is, oh, heck no.
This is what actually scares me the most. And I actually said this to Grant Wilson. I said, if I had to choose of being contacted or abducted by ETs, or if I had to be in something that I didn't know was haunted, and all of a sudden started hearing noises in different areas, and then all of a sudden I see light coming from behind me, I would be much more scared from a ghost, even though the majority of them are spirits of dead people. And of course there obviously are spirits of elementals as well, but that's my opinion, because I do still have that fear of the unknown as much as I embrace it. So if you had because you've already been around ghosts and things like that, do they frighten you at the level that I do? Or between an ET or a ghost, would any of them cause a little more fear?
Having never had an encounter with an ET, I really can't say. I've never, to my knowledge, seen an unidentified flying object, or anything extraterrestrial. I have friends and other investigators on my team who claim to have had encounters with ETs and UFOs, but I personally have not. But like I said earlier, I'm pretty desensitized to all of it. I'm very analytical. Yeah. And, even right down to my very first experience with a ghost, it didn't occur to me at the time to be frightened. by what I saw. So I don't know that I would be frightened by anything like that. I have seen what I believe to be a demon,
Oh.
and stupid me, instead of going, okay, I'm getting out of here, I went, well, I'm going to try to take your picture. And um, so I don't know that I don't know that I would be frightened by anything like that. I was afraid of the dark until I started investigating. And, it took a couple of years, but now I'm quite comfortable being alone in the dark, or just being in the dark in general. Um, so, it takes a lot. It really takes a lot to unnerve me.
Well, that I gotta hand it to you. You're because of all the, both because of your analytical mind and the amount of things you've investigated for such a long time. Just like you said, you're desensitized. I've had some sightings too that were obviously things I didn't expect. And with mass witnesses, by the way, of craft, one was in Greece, and that was probably the largest one since thousands upon thousands people saw it. And one was here in Southern California, which literally maybe 30 to 50 people saw it. But there was another couple times where this shocked me, but people had claimed that they can summon UFOs at will. I didn't believe it, and so I showed up. Sure enough, I capture things on footage, and it's like clockwork. These people meditate and things show up. So I've had a little more encounters with those, but I don't know if those were like drones, or because they looked smaller and they were not acting in the way the other craft were. Again, they literally fit the definition of unidentified flying object, because I can't tell you what it is. All I know is it's unidentified. Let me ask more about this demon that you saw. Can you describe what it looked like, how big it was, maybe features, or was it just in the shadow?
It was a black, very, very shadowy, not wispy, but very shadowy figure, about the size, I'd say, of a 1-year-old baby. But it almost had cat-like ears. Didn't have a tail. Didn't appear to be wearing clothing, but otherwise, had a very round head and human features. Had claws for fingers, and I actually saw it in a nursery bedroom, and it was underneath the changing table, and it was crawling upside down toward me underneath this changing table, crawling toward me. And 2 other investigators also saw it. And like I said, it was probably 3 to 5 feet away from me. And instead of going, I'm getting out of here, I went, well, I'm going to start taking your picture. And so it was, in hindsight, I probably should have left the room, if not the building. But my team affectionately calls me Fearless Leader, and so I guess I lived up to my nickname.
Yeah, I would call you Fearless Leader too. That's for sure. Now, because we are coming too close to the break, and I know we could probably literally go on to the second hour, but the second hour guest is here. So let's talk about. You did mention your show. Do you have any websites? Anything that talk about your paranormal group? Anything you'd like to plug in? Let's take advantage of that.
Sure. You can find more information on my research and myself by visiting the website for the Colorado Coalition of Paranormal Investigators, which is ccpi-paranormal.com. You can find more information on myself and my books at cccvbooks.com. That's CCCV for Chris Carr and Clarissa Vazquez. So cccvbooks.weebly.com. And let's see. And for Periscope Uncensored, you can find us at para-scope.wixsite.com. You can also find all of those organizations on Facebook.
Excellent, excellent. And again, folks, I want to thank you all for joining us for this first hour. When we come back, we are going to be speaking to Michelle Bellinger. She is a psychic vampire and a demonologist, and she also worked for Wizards of the Coast, which I thought was cool because if you heard the other day, actually I think it was Monday, you probably heard the fact that, or Tuesday, that I talked about the fact that I've been playing Magic the Gathering for 25 years, since 1993. So again, Clarissa Vazquez, I want to thank you for joining me, and everybody out there, please be sure to check out her show. And remember the Spookathon. She will be on Saturday night, technically Sunday morning, 4 a.m. to 7 a.m. Eastern, that 3-hour show. And I will be on 22 hours later, 2 to 4 a.m. Eastern, Monday morning, 11 p.m. Pacific. So again, thanks again, Clarissa, for joining us. Everybody, you stay tuned. We'll be back right after this short break.
Being a dad